Hi guys, welcome to another tutorial. Today we'll be talking about shape and form and using simple shapes to create a figure. We'll start by using circles and lines. Circle for the head and joints, and simple lines for gesture and the framework of the limbs. Triangles will represent the extremities such as hands and legs, and also the hips. So you'll see I begin to add circles to represent each bend or each joint, and add a triangle to the hip bones. Lastly, we'll use squares or rectangular shapes to represent the meat of the limbs and the torso. Remember to keep the pressure on your pencil light as you're drawing. This makes it easier to draw straight or flowing lines. It also makes it easier to erase if you make a mistake. Later on, we're going to add darker lines as we begin to flesh out the body. The shoulders and the hips will be represented with horizontal lines, with small circles at the end to represent where the other joints connect. The shoulders and the hips work together in tandem to create balance in the body. A shape is created when lines enclose upon themselves in a two-dimensional space. This can either be 3 lines to create a triangle, or more to create polygons, or one curved line that meets at its beginning and end to create a circle. Form is created when you give depth to these shapes, or volume. So then you have height, length, and width. In nature, there are no geometric shapes or forms. There are organic shapes and forms. Organic shapes and forms don't have names. They're original creations of the artist. And the difference between an organic form and a geometric form is usually that organic forms are more curved. They have rounded edges and curved lines. One way to make your drawings look more organic, especially with the gesture, is to use curved lines. Use an S curve or a C curve to give the spine or the torso of your body more of an organic feel. It makes it feel more alive. A good example of turning a geometric form into an organic form would be to take the foot or the hand, the triangle, and to curve one of the edges. Now it looks like the hand is arching or bent. As a beginner, it's best to start with simple forms and simple shapes when you're creating anything, especially in the beginning stages. Because if you try to create with high levels of detail from the beginning, it's easy to get lost in the smaller things. And then when you step back, you have a really disfigured drawing. So remember to start with a framework, use squares, circles, and triangles. Use general shapes that cover the majority of the form. And then build up. You want your basic forms, your secondary forms, and then your tertiary forms. Don't start with your tertiary forms. So define basic forms would be basic box shapes, or a sphere, or a triangle. The secondary forms would be the muscles and the bones and protrusions. The tertiary forms would be the veins and the hairs and all the smaller things. So each form builds up on top of the next. And if you have a flaw in your basic form, you're never going to have a very good secondary or tertiary form. You can begin to add smaller details after you've created a working frame. You'll notice that with organic shapes, many of them are asymmetrical, if not all of them. So you'll notice with the calves, there's a sort of diamond shape, but it's asymmetric. This helps to give a feeling of rhythm or flow throughout the body. Each video, I want to try to give you the most useful content possible. So if you have any suggestions or any feedback, feel free to leave a comment below I'll be sure to check it out. Thanks. You can use a simple box shape to represent the hand after you've drawn a triangle. Should make the front end of the hand slightly curved, where the fingers would protrude from. I like to make the fingers a little bit bent as well, to make them seem natural too, or to break them up into at least 2 segments, each one with a different angle, that makes the fingers look like they are being contracted. We begin to complicate the design by adding in smaller details. I drew a line to represent the front of the head, and I began to erase my construction lines. Now, if you're using a 2H or if you're pressing softly enough, you won't need to do this because your lines will be almost invisible. But I did this because I used a 2B, so it's easier for everyone to see. In general, I don't need to use construction anymore, because I've practiced this exercise so many times that I can sort of skip this step. I can immediately go to working on the rhythm of the body, or the overall form, the outlines, so to say. But as a beginner, it's absolutely necessary that you focus on working with simple shapes, drawing the gesture, and drawing the construction lines for the framework of the arms and the legs. You need to get this into your head, because even though I'm not drawing this, I'm thinking about it. I'm considering construction. I'm thinking about where do the hips protrude? Where do the knees bend? What's the ratio and what are the proportions? Which muscles are expanding and which ones are contracting? Where is the skin stretched and contracted? Should there be folds in the skin? Which part of the face protrudes more? So there's so much to consider. And as a beginner, we don't think about this. So the first thing, or the fundament, the first thing you need to consider is the basic construction. I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks that beginners face is not knowing how to think about drawing, not knowing how to go about drawing. See, the thing is, we don't look at something to copy it. We look at something to analyze it. And that's how you capture it or draw it. If you can analyze it accurately, you can draw something onto paper that represents it well enough. The problem is, beginners try to copy the details and the things that they notice that look nice. But details are at the top of a hierarchy when it comes to design. Structure and form and shape would be at the bottom. There are other things in between, but details and shading and lighting and reflections, all the nice things, they go at the top. Those are the things you should add last. You can think of doing a drawing like running a marathon. You don't start the marathon at the finish line. In fact, before you even start the marathon, there's much training, there's preparation. That would be the structure and the form. When you're running the marathon, that's when you begin to face problems. That's where you add more details in. But you can think of adding in the fine details. You can think of adding in the reflective lights and the shadows as crossing the finish line. You should do that last. I think another problem facing beginner artists is they watch experienced artists, or they watch artists on YouTube create time-lapse videos where they do these amazing drawings, and it's like they start at one edge of the page and then they work to the other edge of the page. No construction lines, no design, no mistakes. They're like photocopiers. And then as a beginner you try to replicate that, and then you make mistakes and you don't know why. You can't do it like the person you just watched. But what you don't know is that person practiced that same drawing over and over, or they cut their mistakes, or they drew the construction lines so light that you can't see them. But there was preparation involved. The video is for entertainment, so don't try to replicate what other people are doing for entertainment. Here we're going to draw a more dynamic pose. We're going to start with the head and draw this line of the spine down, but angled forward, as if you were leaning forward. You're going to connect the hips and the shoulders first. Then you're going to start with the legs. So the leg leading the body will have the hips slightly more forward. Don't worry about the triangle I drew. I think I was just correcting a mistake there. As you can see, the leading leg is forward and bent, and also lifted, while the leg in the rear disappears into the distance. The arm leading is also opposite to the leg leading, so that would be the left arm and the right arm. The foot of the leading leg is lifted up, while the foot of the rear leg is pressed against the ground. I represent this by using a slight curve at the top triangle, or the top edge of the triangle of the rear leg. Lastly, the right arm of the body won't be seen. It's behind the torso, although it is important to still draw it, just in case something might protrude. Lastly, we fill in the basic shapes: squares, triangles, rectangular shapes. And when you're drawing the shapes that go from the forearm to the elbow, or from the knee to the ankle, it's important to have them thin down towards the wrist and towards the ankle. This helps to give the effect of a forearm or a calf before you start to complicate things. Then again, I've removed my constructions and I've started to add in smaller details like toes to the feet and the ankle bones, the shape of the calves, the shape of the neck, and the shape of the arms. I'm also using a rounded edge to figure out, or to flesh out, where exactly the hips are and which way they're facing. Lastly, I create a fist by making a small box. I've done a few extra drawings here below using just a circle and the spine to create a head and a gesture curve, and I advise you to experiment doing the same. Start with a circle, use your gesture curve, create a vertical S curve, C curve. Go nuts, experiment, be spontaneous, make mistakes, and let the curves take you where they will. If you draw something vertical, try to expand it out into a pose. If you use a line that's horizontal or shaped like an S, try to think of a body that's spread out or laying down. Try to imagine how that would look. And don't be afraid to use reference if you get stuck. But when you do look at reference, always try to analyze the picture. Don't try to copy it. Think about where the small joints would be, and where the torso is, and how the hips and shoulders relate to each other. I have more on my Patreon, you can check it out in the link in the description. Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to try this at home. Practice as much as you can. Practice using simple shapes and forms to create as many different poses as you can think of. And don't be afraid to use references as well. It's always good to look at a finished product and try to work out how the artist got there. You can always take a look at simple poses in pictures and try to imagine the construction lines, try to imagine the framework, try to imagine where the joints and circles and triangles would be. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.